Tonight, we're talking about what happens when you criticize people in power and they prove your point by arresting you. Is government corruption a bug, or is that the whole point of the system? That's what we're going to be talking about tonight, here live in the LCI Green Room. Well, hello everyone. I'm Jacob Winograd. I am the host of the Biblical Anarchy podcast here at the Libertarian Christian Institute, part of our Christians for Liberty network, and I'm live here in the green room with you guys tonight. This was actually probably a weird Monday. I usually go live on Mondays, but today we had two green room episodes. If you missed it, we had a pre-recorded green room episode with James Lindsay, interviewed by me and Libertarian Christian host Doug Stewart, that aired earlier today. So definitely stay for this conversation because I'm really excited for our guest tonight. But that conversation with James was also really good. I highly recommend checking that out. We do have other guests in the works for the month of November. We have Scott Horton returning to the show later this month. And then I'm probably going to be tangling with my good friend, more of the leftist, or not quite leftist, but more left-leaning persuasion in the anarchist libertarian spectrum. Jeremiah Harding will be returning to the show in a couple weeks, and we'll be kind of talking about some more of the culture war stuff, and that's good. It can sometimes feel like every time I have him on, even though I rather enjoy our friendship, we're always fighting, but we're fighting in good faith, and I think that's good. And I think we need more of that in our society, people who have different beliefs, whether that's on religion, on culture, on politics, and just sitting down and talking and pushing each other in a friendly way to seek truth and seek understanding. Not enough of that in society today. Too much. There's too many echo chambers. And even though I have strong opinions, I don't like surrounding myself with just people who agree with me. So, but tonight's guest is someone who's also, well, maybe they were afraid at one point, but I think they've grown into their own in terms of speaking out against people they disagree with, although they paid a heavy price for that. And I was thinking about doing some clickbait stuff and saying I was having, someone with the last name Massie on, but I decided against that. But her handle on X is the other Massie. Her name is Rebekah Massie, and I'm going to bring her up now. Rebekah, thanks for joining the show. Thanks for being here. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? I know you also have a position with You Are the Power, a organization that's, of course, run by the great Spike Cohen, a friend of mine who's also been on the show many times as well. But if you want to go ahead and just give a little bio of who you are, your background, what it is you do, professionally if you want to, but also with You Are the Power, and then we'll kind of dive into your story then after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for having me on, Jacob. I really appreciate it. As far as who I am, I'm a mom of three. Professionally, I work as a project manager very close to the IT space, running networking projects. We'll get into my story here, but I've always been one to speak up when things are wrong, sometimes even when it's not the most easy thing to do. And I would say that as we get into my story, you'll kind of see how my framing of the world and viewpoints and everything have changed a little bit as I've gone through this journey. But with You Are the Power, I did recently come on earlier this year in Spike Cohen's organization as the Western Regional Organizer. So I have everything from New Mexico up to Montana West, including Alaska and Hawaii. So if you were in one of those states and looking to get involved, certainly reach out to me and I can get you plugged in right away.
Awesome. You Are the Power is one of those organizations that helps keep me grounded from becoming black-pilled about the liberty movement sometimes. Because if you just pay attention to like libertarian party stuff, or even just like the extent to which we have libertarians or liberty-leaning people in the federal legislature or in other parts of the country, it just feels like either libertarians are always fighting, or there's always drama, or where there's libertarians trying to do things, they're always losing. But You Are the Power is not only a great organization that sort of models how libertarians and people who care about liberty can just work together and not have a lot of drama, but just is very effective, and very, very, very effective in helping families and individuals who have been harmed by, state and local governments overreach and tyrannizing people. So definitely, can't speak highly enough about Spike and that organization. And I thought it was you were a great add to that, because your story kind of fits right in with what You Are the Power is about. I do want to get into your story. So, and obviously, we talked ahead of time, and we'll try to make sure we don't touch on anything that is off limits. But I know a lot of your story has been published by Fire, the organization. I think that kind of stepped in to help you a lot with it. But give us kind of the backdrop in terms of what you were doing when you attended. I guess it was a city council meeting that you attended. To My understanding is to speak up to some kind of corruption. I guess the mayor or someone trying to raise their annual pay or something like that. But go ahead and fill us in with any, background information you think is important leading up to this event, and kind of explain what happened for us.
Yeah, so before the night that kind of culminated and wound up, for lack of a better expression, all over the internet, um, I had been modeling a lot of what I was doing with locals in the Surprise, Arizona community, and even founded my own nonprofit. I did a 501(c)(4) and not a C3 like You Are the Power, but I was emulating a lot of what Spike was doing locally, to work on weeding out corruption, getting into transparency, getting into accountability of the local government, because there were a lot of things that the more layers I peeled back, the more concerning it got. Um, you can look up a couple months before the night of August 20th last year, there was even a sitting councilwoman that was buddies with the mayor who ejected me later, um, who was running for the mayoral seat against another individual who actually won the seat. And she was under review by the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, Rachel Mitchell, for two separate felony counts, because she had actually torn down signs, including campaign legislature and ballot equal signatures and qualification signatures, to get this other gentleman on the ballot as well. So this was not my first rodeo necessarily with the city suppressing speech. And that kind of gives some important backstory into why, when I went up on August the 20th to address the city attorney, who was up for a pay raise, and it was really important to note, it said in his contract that he could have, I think it was exemplary or exceptional job performance, one of the two. I think it was exceptional. And I basically read out the Webster's dictionary definition of what exceptional was, and said, hey, he is nowhere near doing any of these things. In fact, he's ignored this, and he's ignored this, and he's ignored this, and he's ignored this. And I don't have a law degree. I don't pretend to be a lawyer. I don't play one on TV or anything by any means. But there were definitely things that I would go and I would comb through the Arizona Revised Statutes, which is our state law or our state constitution here, and I'd find him in blatant breach of that, where the city was not doing things. So I got up and basically said, hey, he shouldn't be getting a pay raise here. And I had about 60 seconds left on the timer of the 3 minutes that overall you're allowed to speak during public comment period. And at that point in time, the mayor decides to stop me and tell me that I'm not allowed to continue speaking or attack city officials by name or otherwise. And I said, this is not an attack. This is all factual information. And there was a little bit of back and forth. And funnily enough, I even tried to Robert's rules him a little bit, because that's what the city uses for parliamentary procedure. And I go, point of order, the chair is engaged in debate and should be yielding the floor at this point. And wouldn't you know it, the default parliamentarian when the chair gets engaged in debate is the city attorney. So proof right there that he was not doing what he was supposed to be doing. He was also seated in the front row. If you've ever seen the video, he's the one that's got his legs kind of crossed, almost looks like he's watching a football game or something, which is not usually where he sits. He's usually on the dais. And Then what winds up happening is the mayor commands the chief of police, who is in the back, and the chief sends an officer to come and essentially manhandle me and immediately start twisting my arms and put his hand on the small of my back before he even announced his presence. My daughter, my eldest child, was with me at the time because she had seen that I had been going to city council. She had done a couple of school projects using me as an example for civic engagement or somebody who is making changes in the community type of a thing. And so I was literally taking there as a learning experience to say, hey, this is what mom does when she goes out twice a month on a Tuesday evening for a couple of hours to go to city council. And she saw all of this happened. And it gets really, really hard to speak about, but I was thrown to the ground, pinned down, handcuffed in front of my daughter, and then escorted and essentially walked outside to this little they have, like, a common area that has some concrete tables, and I was slammed down on there. It was over 100 degrees, I was trying to stave off a panic attack, they wouldn't let me have water. I couldn't breathe very well because I was, again, trying to not go into a full-blown panic attack, and about 25, 30 feet away is my daughter on the inside of the glass in City Hall with her hands pressed up like this and her face up against the glass, crying and not understanding what's going on. Overall, the ordeal lasted about 90 minutes. I was denied my requests to make phone calls to make sure that somebody could come and pick my daughter up. I did not know and have determined or solidified information as to where she was for the roughly 90 minutes that I was in custody. I was forced to give my fingerprints, or they were going to cart me down to downtown Phoenix, where I would have to wait for a magistrate, is what they had told me. That's the only reason I gave them my fingerprints, because I was still under the impression that my daughter was on site. And I was like, she needs to get home. I was denied my requests to phone an attorney and told that that's not a thing. And all of this is on the body cam footage that you can see of the arresting officers and other officers engaged. In fact, there's a point in time where the assistant chief comes in and on the arresting officer's body cam, before he mutes the body cam footage, goes, "Well, we told you this was going to happen. We told you if you didn't leave that you were going to be arrested, and you said arrest me." And I said, those effing words never came out of my effing mouth. F you. Just not censored, obviously. Which that may seem kind of defiant in that moment. I was terrified. Was I defiant a little bit? Yeah, absolutely. That's just kind of how I am as a person, especially when I know something's wrong. I'm like, "Hey, this is wrong." But, um and then after all of that, I was charged with criminal trespassing, was told that they were going to add 2 additional charges in long form, which is where the attorney or DA or whoever, based on whatever municipality you're arrested in, they're going to add an obstruction of government operations charge, which was another misdemeanor. That's 2 total, and then they were going to also add a resisting arrest charge. Now, the other 2 never wind up coming. It was just that one trespassing charge. But I had that looming over my head for 63 days, and I had to hire a private defense attorney to get those charges dismissed and dismissed with prejudice, which is kind of how You Are the Power came into the picture, in addition to FIRE, or the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, because FIRE took on the civil litigation piece, which is still ongoing. You Are the Power, in conjunction with my defense attorney, my civil attorneys, and myself, was able to draft up a web page. There was an email template, which is something that the organization does do on a regular basis, and I know that the prosecuting attorney's office got inundated with emails. And that's the timing of that was kind of a little suspect, in my opinion, because I knew that the page had been live for maybe like 72, 96 hours, something like that. And then all of a sudden they were open to dismissing the charges. Now they wanted them dismissed without prejudice, of course, because they could have still brought it up a year later, up to, but that's kind of it in a nutshell as far as
Yeah.
what happened that night.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrific. I mean, I had a hard time watching the footage when I watched it. I mean, and just, knowing that your daughter was there, I mean, it's just absolutely brutal. And as far as your comments saying that, and I'm not judging you here, you were like saying, well, maybe I was a little defiant, and like sort of couching what you did to try to make it sound like, well, maybe it sounds bad, but listen, like if in any other context, right? Like if people were able to sort of remove, like I'm sure libertarians have no problem with this, but for anyone who's listening who is not, fully libertarian and who has, any sort of like general, like, well, we should listen to the government, and if they're Christians and they think about Romans 13, and they're just like, well, if the government tells you to do something, submit to it. And I'm just always trying to push people to sort of remove the pretext of what's going on, and just like imagine you don't know what you're walking into, and you just see armed men, manhandling and body slamming, anyone, a man, a woman, uh, for what amounts to you were speaking in a room. That's it. And the idea that, like, well, that you were trespassing and whatnot, like, I'm sorry. I thought that the whole conception of America is that we are the government, that it's government by, it's government by the consent of the governed. Is that, like, that's the whole buy-in, that's everything you're taught from the time you start learning civics in elementary school. That's the whole idea. And so the idea that you could be trespassing at a public meeting in government property, exercising your First Amendment right to free speech, not inciting violence, not attacking anyone, using time, not even out of, it's not like you were given a certain time to speak and then you went over, and then the reaction is, jackboots of the state coming and, uh, again, acting importantly, acting in ways that, again, remove all that pretext aside, I believe any normal, sane, moral person would automatically be against that. But then because the people have badges, suddenly they think that this becomes a complicated thing, and then you feel like you have to defend yourself for being defiant, when that's the normal response anyone would have after
It is.
going through that. Like, so, like, I get where you're coming from, and I think we sometimes as libertarians feel like we have to apologize for our defiance of government, but, um, you know, I I don't know who coined this phrase. I think there was a Christian theologian who coined it, but, I think resistance to tyrants is obedience to God. So,
And I
um,
don't disagree.
yeah. So, but yeah, but thank you for sharing that story. I know it's probably hard to talk about it and, have to relive those moments. What did they do? I'm curious, like, I mean, if you don't wanna talk about that's fine, but, like, what did they do with your daughter? Like, what were they telling her? Like, what was her, like, I can't even imagine, from, I mean, what you went through is
I couldn't get a straight
harrowing.
answer of where she was, is the short of it. I found out after the fact that the person who was running for the mayoral seat that is now in the surprise mayoral seat, who I actually helped him get elected by exposing that other lady, he sat with her the entire time until my husband, so her stepdad, came and got her.
Yeah.
But I didn't
Ho
know.
how
She had to call.
and how old is she again,
So
roughly?
she was 10 last year, she turned
Okay.
11. Her birthday's in December, so she was not even quite 11 yet, and she's just about to turn 12 now.
Yeah. Again, I'm trying to, so, I mean, I think this, most of my audience knows this, but, like, I mean, the name of my podcast is Biblical Anarchy, right? So I wear my anarchist identity kind of on my sleeves. So it's like no surprise to people. I'm not, like, shocking them when I tell them that I don't exactly buy into the when I say I don't buy into the American experiment, I mean, I have issues with the American experiment as far as government goes. It's probably better than some things, but I it's not my ideal, but I'm not anti-America. I love the nation. I love the people. I love even the spirit. I love insofar as the American Revolution was a revolution based on moving to in the direction of liberty. I'm generally in favor of it. But this is just one of those things where it really, I think, starts to, like, if anyone's gonna stop and really think about the, again, the sort of the pretense of all this, and then, like, I'm just imagining, like, your daughter's the age in public school, if she attends public school, where they're teaching this stuff, the basics of these civics, and so there's, like, this extra level of hypocrisy that's just going on in my head thinking about this, that, like, and I know there's different people, like, the teachers at a public school are not the same people as the ones that work in the city, um, office, and the mayor's
Fun
office or
fact,
council, so
one of the people on the dais works for the school district,
okay, so
and that's part of why we recently moved out of Surprise, because one of the people on the dais wound up he was working as, like, an administrator, I think, before, um, at an elementary school, and my daughter was going to leave the elementary school that she was attending, having finished 5th grade in the spring, and she was starting 6th, and that's when for where we were districted for, they had a 6th through 8th middle school, and he was actually the vice principal, and so I had to put at the beginning of the year, I put in, like, a conflict and basically told the school district, I said, "Look, I can't talk the specifics about it," and I said, "But just know that if he has any one-on-one contact with my daughter, you're going to be opening up the district for litigation. Tread carefully," basically. And that was really the final nail in the coffin of what prompted me to really, like, we literally turned around and school started actually July 30th out here, which is bananas, but we moved in, like, mid-September. So literally it's like as soon as she started, I was like, this is gonna be a problem. Because he was,
yeah.
like, on the bus because there was behavioral issues happening on the bus. I was like, "Uh-uh, uh-uh."
That's wild. Yeah, I mean, so, I mean, that makes my point even more, but, like, even if they weren't, even if there wasn't that overlap, it's still an extension of the same system, and the system is simultaneously to your daughter saying, you know, "Well, you participate in this system, and you're part of the system, and in a way, this is all self-government, right? That, like, we are the government, that we are participating in this, and we're consenting to these representatives, and they are representatives for us, and so it's the will of the people, right?" And then, like, it's like gaslighting to say that, and then to, like, reconcile that with everything that she experienced you go through and witnessed, and it just boggles my mind. Um, I don't even know, like, there's something in me that I have a hard time, even, like, as a Christian, I'm told to, pray for those who persecute us, to forgive your enemies, turn the other cheek, and it can be hard when you're thinking about people who, I don't understand the mindset, especially in, like, 21st century America, of people who would, first of all, uh, be so angry at you that they would, uh, order your detainment and arrest. And second of all, like, if I was someone who believed in our system more than I do, and signed up for law enforcement because I had this desire to, like, protect the Constitution and uphold law and justice and protect people. And then they told me to go and forcibly arrest you and detain you. I'd have been like, no, like, absolutely not. Um, and that people are just, and I don't know what it is, if it's just propaganda. I guess there's some kind of, probably training and conditioning that happens when you join law enforcement to just kind of, and not all, like, listen, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush here. There are good people in law enforcement who have at times refused to enforce unjust laws or follow orders that they don't agree with. COVID, as many examples as there were in COVID of officers enforcing COVID tyranny, there were still examples of like, sheriffs and officers coming out and saying, like, we're not enforcing this. So again, I don't want to be, I'm not trying to do the ACAB thing here necessarily, but
No, but it does kind of get very complex because
yeah.
the way I see it is if you've got 1,000 good cops and one bad cop, and the 1,000 good cops don't do anything about the one bad cop, then you have
Mm,
1,001 bad cops at the end of the day. And I don't know if you happen to catch this because it came out right around the time last year when my charges were finally dismissed. So it was like late October, early November. But there was a memorandum that the chief presumably recorded sometime in the immediate 7 days post my arrest. And then it went out on August 27th. So you're talking 7 days after I was arrested. And it was specifically about my incident and how they had gone viral, not in a good way. And they had a bunch of people putting a lot of very hateful comments on their social media, making phone calls, etc. The police chief actually goes on to talk about that my arrest was not unconstitutional. That's not what happened. And then proceeds to bring somebody from Phoenix police who left before the DOJ investigation got involved conveniently and is now doing consultative work for other neighboring precincts and police departments and talks about how to deal with First Amendment auditors, which isn't even what I was doing. And that's not a knock on people who First Amendment audit if that's what they want to do. I think there's probably a better way to go about some of that stuff, but it's your right. I'm not going to knock you for exercising your rights. And I wasn't even out there trying to audit anything resembling the First Amendment. If anything, I was like, audit this guy's pay.
right.
And
You were exercising your First Amendment, right? But you weren't testing it, right? Like, as an
no,
audit is when you just show up and you're almost like, I'm going to, like, almost in a disruptive way, maybe like, like, I have a right to free speech, and so I'm gonna, like, push that limit and see if you guys are going to violate it, which
right. It's like you get up and do
yeah.
the George Carlin bit where he talks about all the words that you can't say on TV.
Right, right, exactly. So, which I think that's even okay personally, but that's different than what you
It's
did, which was
okay.
not even an audit. You're just,
Yeah.
just, in an allotted time for, public comment, getting up and being part of the public commenting. Like, what is, like, like, let's take a step back for a minute and really try, like, I mean, it might be impossible, but I'm often encouraged by, like, my pastor and other people who are, like, sympathetic to what I do, but they're like, sometimes because you're a libertarian, you're just already dismissive and you have your bias, and you might not want to do that so quickly. So it's like, all right, what's like, what is the strongest version, if it exists, of uh the opposing view here that says that, like, your arrest wasn't unconstitutional, and they had, like, what, at least what's their spin? What's their propaganda? What's their story for, like, why they why what they did was justified or they had to do it?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is none of it makes sense. I mean, I know that see, that's the other part that is kind of the unsung part of this song, if you will. There were multiple op-eds written about me by local people, including one gentleman who just would not let it go. The guy's, like, in his 80s, really close friends with the former mayor, and proceeded to compare what I did while getting assaulted by an officer to a toddler temper tantrum meltdown, and that I was a terrible example for my daughter and that I'm not fit to raise my daughter. And he was all over Facebook. He was all over the op-eds, all to the point where I literally was like, keep my daughter out of your mouth or we are going to have a problem. And he was like, you're censoring me. I said, no, I'm a parent and I will do anything and everything to protect my child.
Of
Read
course.
between whatever lines you want to.
But even that's like, what is that like? Okay, like, let's say that was even true, and I've listened to your speech. You were very calm. Like, you were like the
I
only
was
time
decidedly meaner when I was bringing up the the charges that the sitting councilwoman almost got charged with. Like, it was kind of like the defense rests your, or like the prosecution rests your honor, type of a thing.
Yeah, but, like, you weren't throwing a but, like, let's say, like,
No,
you got up there and you were, I don't know, like, rude, or you were cursing, or you were, I don't know, like, disorderly in some way, like, okay, like, let the ladies finish talking, say, "Alright, your time's up," and, like, who is being hurt? Like, what's the
nobody
like,
other than the sitting council's feelings.
right, and, this what's that saying? "Thou, dost protest too much?"
Methinks
Like,
the lady doth protest too much.
right, so it's like you get up there and you're like, "I don't think you deserve this pay raise," and, sounds like that touched a nerve maybe, right? Because if, like,
Yeah,
if you were wrong in everything you said, then, like, they could have said, "Well, thank you for that. I disagree, and here's why." Right? They could have said, "You said I didn't do my job here. Here's actually how I did my job on this specific duty that I did," or something. I don't know. Like, that would have been
he
the
didn't
the
have a leg to stand
mature,
on from that standpoint
or
because as
even
I
then he could have
started to
just,
rattle stuff off, but
he could have also just ignored you. Like, I recently attended, a city council meeting, and it's in my county, but not the city I live in, but it was close enough I wanted to attend, where they were talking about passing more gun laws. They were gonna pass laws that would ban bump stocks, that would ban binary triggers, bunch of other, like, things, including, and then it was like, what really made me mad enough to actually show up was that the legislation ends with, "And uh, any device or modification that, can make the firearm fire at a faster rate." And I was like, "Well, that's open-ended to mean
that's really
anything."
no.
I was like, that is like, that's, it's bad enough to be banning, bump stocks and specific accessories, but at least that's kind of like, uh, that's unconstitutional, but limited to one specific thing. When you start doing
Right, it's
these
a little bit
twisting
more
and
of like a
open,
concrete term, for
right,
sure,
whereas
as far as the
open-ended,
ban, but anything that makes
anything,
the gun fire faster.
yeah, I was like, "So what, my
So
hand?"
if somebody
Like,
comes out with like a new cleaning lubricant that makes your slide rack faster, like, is
right.
that illegal now too? Like,
Right,
what?
if my gas tube breaks, do I gotta make sure I buy a gas tube that, like,
That's
doesn't
rated the
cause the
exact
gun.
same?
Right,
Like,
exactly. I mean, it's just, it's crazy. Like, how do you enforce that? The implication, so, like, people from the Gun Owners of America showed up, and a bunch of conservative libertarians showed up, all made our case, and the city council people just ignored us. Like, they would let us get up, we would speak, and they'd just be like, "Okay, next.
and that's usually
Okay,
what they
next.
have done
Okay, ne,"
in
and
the
then
past.
at the
Like,
end, they just all voted unilaterally to pass the bill. So it was like,
right, and that's what drives me bananas is, like, I had been quote unquote "meaner" before. Not that I was ever unprofessional, there were definitely times where I got a little bit more heated, animated, passionate, whatever phrase you want to put there, but it was all based in fact. I had everything to back up every single allegation that I made, cited laws, case laws, whatever it may be, municipal code, whatever. Um, so anything the city has really tried to do has been, I mean, the fact that the chief recorded that video 7 days or distributed it 7 days, so whether it was recorded within the 7 days and then distributed on the 7th day, we don't really have an answer to that, but the fact that that's his testament about this is not like this is he actually says something on that video saying that we carried out the mission that night with speed and precision, which I'm not like a terrorist in the middle of the desert or something that you need to go find me hiding out in a cave.
yeah,
I'm a
that's
mom
right.
who's an IT nerd and would rather platinum trophy video games, so the fact that I'm even here in
I
spare time going, "Hey, this is wrong." Like,
that's just even
I'm
that
not
that
a threat.
that language is even just more evidence of the militarization of law enforcement. And I think sometimes we talk about the militarization in terms of just, like, the weaponry and stuff, but it's even just, like, the language, the mindset, like, I mean, good grief, our founding fathers, as flawed as they would be, as flawed as they
Even
were.
Hamilton would be, like, rolling in his grave
Yeah,
right now
right.
with
Like, you
what's
guys
going
have a,
on.
yeah, like, they'd be like, "This is a standing army." Like, "This is, like, you guys
Uh-huh.
have a standing army. What are you doing?" Oh, it's just absolutely nuts. And yeah, I don't, and yeah, I struggle with that whole, if there's one bad cop, there's a thousand bad cops. I think it's true. I try to be as nuanced as I can on this thing because, like, I know people in law enforcement. I go to church with people who are in law enforcement. I go to church with people who served in the army, who have kids in the army. Um, and I try to recognize that there are people who go into those things for the right intentions, but man, do they, I mean, the problem, especially with the military, probably police too, is that it's kind of like grooming, that they go after really young people who
They do,
have
and they don't leave you
aspirations.
alone.
Yeah,
If you don't
and
wanna be harassed by recruiters, anybody who's in high school listening, don't take the ASVAB. Don't do it.
yeah. Well, I had one friend who signed up for the military, and I had, like, really, mixed feelings. I tried to convince him not to do it. He signed up, he went there, and he was, like, one of the few people who, like, after he went through basic training, found, I guess it was like a, at least for certain, I don't know if it's, I think he was going for the Army. I don't know if you go for the Marines or there might be different rules for different parts of the military, but at least with what he was applying for, he had this, like, window of after basic training where he could get out technically. But man, did they fight him tooth and nail. Like, I
I believe it
mean,
because they had already invested whatever it was
right,
into
exactly. But, like,
one.
one, he had gotten in enough just to realize, like, there's something, like, off here. Like, it's not just training you to be tough and strong and follow orders, but it's, like, dehumanizing and, orienting you towards just, like, blind obedience to follow the commanding officers. And, I did an episode couple years ago for a podcast. We have a book here at LCI. I'll plug here because it's related to what I'm talking about, called Faith Seeking Freedom. We're working on the second edition of this right now, but it's 100 right now. It's 100 questions uh, that people will have about libertarianism, especially from a Christian perspective. And one of the questions, we made a podcast as a spin-off of this book for people who, like, submit questions and whatnot that weren't in the book. And one of the questions was, can Christians serve in the military? And I tackled this and I was like, well, so listen, just like, in terms of pure principle, there's nothing anti-Christian about defending your country or defending your nation or self-defense. Uh, in terms of just like the modern application of that, there is something pernicious about serving in the military, and I think this extends to serving in law enforcement or in any government capacity where there's this oath swearing uh, to the Constitution, to the government, to just kind of like follow your commanding officers and whatnot. And if you don't, you can get dishonorably discharged and all that. And I was like, as a Christian, it's like I never want to be too legalistic with this stuff. But I think that at the end of the day, in this connotation, this modern context, if you live in America, I don't know how you can be a completely consistent, faithful Christian and serve in the military, because you'll be put in positions, most likely, inevitably, especially if you serve for life, where you are asked to do something that is going to, if you're following the Bible fully, I think it's going to come against your convictions. And they don't want you to have that submission to the higher power. Um, so yeah, no, I think it's very tough, and I think it applies to law enforcement too. Like, I'm not against people wanting to, like, hey, I want to serve my community. I think better than police would be, militias and private uh, law enforcement and protection agencies. Like, there's a desire there that's good, but in the modern context, I don't think Christians can do it.
Yeah, it definitely is kind of a little bit of a paradox there, and can definitely, it's like competing priorities, competing hierarchy of what's what, for sure.
Yeah. I'm curious, you sort of alluded to this. You said, like, some of your view, 'cause I guess you were libertarian before this happened, but you said some of your views definitely shifted through this experience. What are some things that, either beliefs, like specific beliefs, or if it's just more of a general kind of like meta level perspective on government or libertarianism, like, what are some ways in which your thinking has changed after this has occurred?
Yeah, I mean, so I've definitely always been more in the liberty movement than I have anything else. Even though I was raised in a very conservative, very like I'm the daughter of a pastor. So I grew up in a very religious, very Republican household. Um,
Fellow pastor's kid here.
yes, so you can relate. But I think what really changed for me is as like in 2008 and 2012 when the Republicans put up McCain and then Romney when Ron Paul was running both times, is just bananas to me, and that's kind of where I really started to and that was when I was like, I'm about to turn 34, so I graduated high school in 2010. So, like, 2008, missed being able to vote in that by about a year, for the presidential, so my first one was Romney, and that was a very interesting time to be kind of coming of age, as it were, because we were in the fiscal crisis, post George W. Bush. And there were things that my parents would wind up harping on, where I was just like, why do we like why do you care about this so much? And it could have been stuff, from like the gay marriage aspect of it, where I was like, okay, so you and dad are already married. Why do you care if two gay guys get married? Type of a thing. Like, how does that impact your marriage? Type of a thing. There were definitely things that, as kind of the ACAB movement moved through, a few years later, I was like, yeah, like, I don't want to sound like a leftist or anything, but at the same time, you see the militarization of the police, you see the disproportionate things that happen, and you just keep questioning. And so I think I finally bit the bullet and registered libertarian, I want to say somewhere between 2016 and 2018. And then I was always kind of in the staunch minarchist camp, even up until my arrest. And where I was like, look, like there probably has to be some sort of structure, some sort of guardrails here. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, a barge in international waters is looking less crazy by the day. Like, I cannot stress enough how much watching all of this, watching the court process, watching the federal civil court process and everything like that, just being dragged out, watching the city drag its feet, seeing what they're trying to do, to the civil suit and things of that nature, which if you followed the suit along, at first everything was filed with just like federal First and Fourth Amendment claims primarily. In early January of this year, Fire filed an amended complaint that included some state claims, like excessive force. It had the language in there to try and waive qualified immunity for the officers involved, things of that nature. And the city is now, granted, the magistrate hasn't made a decision, the judge hasn't made a decision on this, but the city is trying to get my state-related claims dismissed. And I'm like, you have literally zero argument. Like, you violated open meeting law. You doubled down on the fact that my arrest was not unconstitutional. You said that this is part of your procedure. This is how you run your community, this, that, and the other thing. And you literally had a sitting councilman at one point in time tell a local newspaper that, hey, are you afraid of lawsuit? No, bring it on. Bring on the lawsuit. Like, what?
Yeah.
It's like going off of the title today, right? Like, is it a feature or a bug?
Yeah, no,
Somebody who likes Bethesda games a lot, I think the bug is the feature at this point.
Right. That's a good reference. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the key difference, I think, between not even just like, because I think there are some really principled minarchists who I think are like the same at heart as what I believe in, but just kind of describe the principled way to govern society in slightly different conceptions. There can be a little bit of muddy area between like radical minarchy and anarcho-capitalism, or just anarchy, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think like I think there's like people who are like libertarian and sort of a like, yeah, I believe in limited government, and they're just kind of like they think that's the more efficient way to do things. And there's not listen, nothing like I, I'm I'm more of a Mises Institute guy than I am a Cato guy. But I don't hate Cato. I don't hate reason. I do sometimes get like I don't feel they always fully represent where I'm at though. Because I think they're trying to do this kind of like more mainline libertarian messaging where they're almost trying to be like the sort of like respectable kind of like, forward facing part of the movement that's like, listen, we're not crazy. We just want, responsible government. We just want transparency. We just want, common sense reforms, right? Um, you know, and I get that. But I think when people there's a distinct difference between that kind of libertarian and then people who, whether that's because they've been harmed, such as you are, or they've just really like drank deep of like looking into the truth of, whether it's war, whether, like again, foreign policy, like war, or war, like domestic, the war on drugs and our criminal justice system, uh, you name it, all the different areas in which government tyrannizes people. They then start to transition from just oh, we just want to make things better and more efficient and more limited, to just being like, this is evil. This is
It's a
there's something.
hard pill
Yeah.
to swallow when you start to wake up in that. Like,
Yeah.
it's been interesting because then it's like I have to, as a parent, right, I have to be careful that I'm not inadvertently blackpilling my kids
Yeah.
either. Because
Yeah,
again,
that's
I have
tough.
my oldest was 10 last year. She turned 11 in December. So right now, my oldest is gonna be turning 12 in December. My middle one just turned 9 in June, and my youngest is 4. He's about to turn 5 here on Sunday. And he's unfortunately seen some of the video, like, if we were watching it and he walked in or what have you, and how do you I literally had to explain at the time to my 3-year-old, sometimes the cops are the bad guys.
Yeah.
I literally took him to, like, an indoor play place couple weeks ago, and it's one of those places where they have, like, different rooms that are kinda themed for, like, imaginative play, like, there's, like, a kitchen, there's, like, a store, there's a doctor, there's a veterinarian, there's a house type of a thing, there's police and firemen, and he
Yeah.
grabbed the police and fireman stuff, after running the gauntlet of everything else, and he was saying, uh, n like, 991 instead of 911. We're still working on that, by the way, but, like, he was going, "Oh, n 991 to call the police and the fire," and he goes and he asks me, like, across the play place, and thank God, like, most everybody had emptied out. There happened to be, like, a little like, people had left and then some new people came in, but he goes, "Did they call 991 when the police officers came and got you?" And I was like,
Oh man. Right. Because I mean, like, that's right there. That's the whole thing. Like, we're supposed to. So it's actually funny. Like, I remember talking to James yesterday, although the episode aired today, and we touched a little bit on the, anarchism versus uh more constitutionalist or minarchist views of government. And he's like, well, we have a constitution because that protects our rights, and yeah, government can tyrannize us, but the constitution gives us the ability to, like, have a check on that government tyranny, to, watch the watchers. And I'm just like, it's like,
I don't think you understand how it works, man.
it like you insert that Thor meme with like, does it really though? Right? Like, I
Right,
mean, like
and trust
it
and believe, you don't wanna be in the position that I'm in because, like, the easiest thing to do would be to, like, walk away, change my name, and, like, completely delete my online presence type of a thing. Like, I've been doxxed as a result of this. There's just been, like, all kinds of crazy things that have happened, but at the end of the day, I'm making the decision to fight not only because it's the right thing, but what message do I send to my kids
right.
if I just roll over,
Yeah.
you
No,
know?
absolutely. It is a harder path for sure. I mean, I think that should be, especially for, I mean, the Christians listening. I mean, that's the Bible says the path is narrow that leads to life. It would be absolutely easier to just kind of like look the other way to tyranny and injustice, and you could you could easily go back to just kind of like, I'm not saying it'd be easy. It'd probably be actually really hard with what you've been through, but it would there'd be less resistance from the world if you went back to even just being a more normie libertarian that's just like, I just want to make things more efficient and just have more fair laws and and balance the budgets and things like that. It's harder to be it is a bigger rock rolling up a steeper hill to tell people like, actually, I think that the system we live in is a giant sham, right? And I don't think we are the government. And as your back for the audio listeners who don't know, her background says we are not government
Government
property, and
property, yeah.
yeah, and I take that one step. Like we are, I just this whole conception of consent by the governed. I mean, I think listen, there are times, these rare moments when the will of the people, so to speak, or, like something good happens from this process, but that's kind of more the exception than the rule. Like the rule in this system that we live in, is it's not the will of the people. I mean, I don't even know how like I don't know how normal people even view the whole Epstein case. Other than I guess they just listen to the propaganda if they're uh, MAGA people and just go, "Oh, I guess there was nothing there." Right?
Yeah, I mean,
Which
really
I
either side of the fence. Like, I've sat there and I've watched kind of the pendulum swing violently, left, right, in my formative years and into my adulthood so far, and I'm just like, "Man, y'all were over here like Obama was the Antichrist, and then Trump's doing some stuff that's way more authoritarian than Obama ever did." And Obama was not a good president by any means, but it's like we're taking the good things that Trump's doing, like some of the pardons. For instance, like I know one of the really big ones was with Ross Ulbricht,
yeah.
which thank God, I had the pleasure when I went to Freedom Fest this year of actually meeting Lynn, his mother, kind of commiserated mother to mother. And I said, hey, look, like I know what I went through is nothing compared to being locked up in the way that he is, but like, I can't imagine, like, I know how powerless I felt in that moment where my daughter was crying on the other side of the glass 30 feet from me. I can't imagine what it would have been like
That
if
woman has an indomitable spirit.
she's an incredible human being, so if you've not had
Yeah.
the chance to meet her or hear anything that she's done, I certainly recommend it. But it's like we're taking a win like that, and even if you like, I'm not for government welfare, like, just to be clear, but even if we look at, like, the SNAP situation that's going on right now, you literally have government funding that's being halted right now. That's the system created the dependency, right? And it's unprecedented that they would completely just cut those things off.
Well, the expression, "The government breaks your leg and then hands you a crutch." It's like, well, in this case, the government breaks your leg, hands you a crutch, but then takes the crutch away while your leg is still broken.
Yeah, I mean, my
Uh,
husband even told me, like, an hour before we started this, he was like, "Hey, did you see what the Trump administration is doing?" I said, "Oh god," because now I've got him on the government BS train too, naturally. When he was vehemently like, "I'm not head in the sand, don't wanna look at it," type of a thing, and he goes, "There's grocery stores that are giving people discounts if they can prove that they were on SNAP benefits." So a private company, mind you, making a decision to eat something off of their bottom line to help out their fellow man. And apparently now he said that there was an article that said the Trump administration is basically telling him to knock it off.
that's
Make
crazy.
that make sense. You wanna say that like, he's a good guy? How is literally taking mouths like, food out of the mouths of disabled and children, or disabled children, or elderly, or anybody, right? How is
But
that inherently good?
but don't worry, the money for Ukraine and Israel
Oh,
and
and the
all the
money
other
for
countries we give
Argentina.
country, yeah, all that, yeah, to and for Venezuela to keep bombing boats. Like that
Yeah, we're
stuff.
gonna regime change over there.
Yeah, for war, the money never runs out, but for the people
Mm-mm.
who we've, impoverished through our monetary policy and through taxing them to death, um, yeah, that money might run out. It's absolutely like, I'm writing a book
And
right
Congress
now.
is still getting paid through all of this,
Oh,
which is
yeah,
just like,
absolutely.
what the hell? You know?
Yeah. I'm reading through, uh, some of the minor prophets right now, like the Book of Amos, who goes up to the king and talks about all the sinful behaviors they do, which some of them are really horrific, but then also talks about their economic injustice towards people. And it's like you've created a system where the expression he uses is that the poor are sold for the price of a sandal. And what that got at was that the economic situation there had gotten so bad that if people even had a little bit of debt, that they basically became slaves to the system. And I was like, "Wow, that's basically what we have today, actually, where
Pretty much.
people."
Like, everybody's, like, 1 or 2, like, really bad weeks away from being homeless.
Right, exactly, and and I, uh, I said this on Larry Sharp's show the other day when I was on it. I was like, "I understand the anger of the left." I was a leftist at one point, and you just even if you don't understand economics, you don't understand the underlying issues, you just look at the economy, you look at the system that we're in, and you go, "Well, this isn't right." Like, this is just absolutely backwards. There's no reason why people should be having to work so hard to barely make ends meet, to barely afford to put food on the dinner table for their families, while there are people who are getting rich doing nothing, like, except just, like, gambling with money essentially, and then getting bailed out when they banks
Right,
and
and
large corporations getting bailed out when they don't like, Main Street doesn't get bailed out, but Wall Street does, and banks do. We know as libertarians that, like, okay, so we're taxing the rich and welfare and redistribution doesn't work, but that doesn't mean that then we just side with the big banks and the corporations and say that
no,
what
we
we
have,
have,
like, a
like, we
corporate
don't.
welfare
Yeah,
system right now, basically, is what we have. Like, the
right.
folks that think that capitalism doesn't work don't understand that what we have right now is not
We have
capitalism.
socialism. We have
Yeah,
socialism for the rich instead of socialism for the poor. We have socialism for the rich and then just, like, let them eat cake for the poor,
right.
essentially.
Because some of the way that those benefits work don't make any sense.
No, and the other problem with the system is that, like, you know, I try not to be so, like, I'm very radical in my ideology, right? I try to, like, when it comes to political strategy, to not be an absolutist. Like, if someone
Yeah, I
wanted to
usually
talk
try
to
to be
me.
pretty pragmatic as long as it's not at the cost of my principles.
Right, like, if someone wanted to say, "Let's change the welfare system to make it like almost a reverse income tax that, like, you're not necessarily penalized for making more money," which is the way things work right now is that you have the income tax paired with welfare, where, like, as you try to climb the economic ladder, you hit these points where making more money causes you to lose money. And
Yeah.
it's this perverse incentive system. So if someone wanted to, like, instead of just completely abolishing everything, pass legislation that kind of like fix some of that, like, I'd be for it. But no one wants to do that. There's no incentive to do
Yeah,
that.
and it's really hard to even try to get people to wrap their heads around it, so I think that's probably why nobody's attempted to go on that undertaking, so to speak, because it's unfortunately what we keep seeing time and time again, whichever way the pendulum keeps swinging, right, is people as a whole wanting to be free and wanting to be self-governing is not a popular opinion. It's not a popular viewpoint to have.
At some point, it's gonna be a matter of survival, though,
It
because I
is.
mean, at the end of the day,
There's no
like,
disagreement for me.
I don't think the pendulum swinging can continue indefinitely. At some point, and I don't know how the left isn't. I hope they're getting more amenable to this. The right's not open to it right now because Trump's in power. They seemed like they were getting open to it before. Whenever one party is not in power, those people are at least like, on the surface, they'll kind of go, oh, yeah, maybe we shouldn't give the executive branch all this power. But then as soon as their person's in, then they're suddenly fine with it again. And that's my only problem. Like Democrats doing the No Kings protests and calling out Trump's authoritarianism, I often agree with them on most of that. But then just go like, you basically built this throne when Obama and Biden were in power and,
Right.
and built all this architect like Trump, he's bypassed some things and uh shortcut some things, but for the most part, he's just taking what was already established and just like,
Yeah, he's
everyone's
just
already
taking whatever authority and then using it
to
in
the
the way
maximum.
opposite that Obama and Biden did.
Yeah, he's just taking the things that were there and like ratcheting them up to 11. I mean, he's probably I mean, Obama deported more people than Trump did his first term. Now I think Trump's probably gonna outdo him in the second term, unfortunately. So that's not good either. And I'm
There's a
not
lot of,
even
like, propaganda from that aspect too being pushed. Like, I don't know how much YouTube you watch or anything like that, but my husband's a big, like, WWE fan, has been for pretty much his whole life. Well, WWE recently has been partnering with a Mexican luchador promotion, AAA, and so they typically will air some of their stuff on YouTube, and it's to the point where we will be watching in Arizona the WWE luchador crossover event, and the targeted ads on there are DHS Barbie Christy Nome talking about deporting people, and I'm like, "Are you like really? I can't
yeah,
even watch a Mexican wrestling promotion without having this like shoved down my throat."
even like Instagram and TikTok and all this are you can tell there's like creators who are incentivized to create these short little reels where they show, heavily doctored footage of things, of immigrants, of Muslims in ways that are obviously meant to fearmonger and obviously meant to sow division and hate. And there's just at the end of the day, like I think that there are reasonable concerns people have about like mass immigration, like, reasonable concerns people can have about, what do we do if we like there's always the reasonable concerns of like, well, what do we do about X? What do we do about Y if we don't have government involved? And I'm just constantly trying to do two things: to tell people you might have a reasonable concern here, but keep in mind that when you advocate for the government to address this concern, what you're advocating for is an increase in centralized power, and you're advocating for men with guns to solve this problem. And ask yourself if bringing, men with guns with, permission to use legal violence is the right way to handle this. There's a lot of people who, advocated for, who voted for Trump and advocated for like restricted immigration, and now they're crying foul when they see all that stuff
I know
ratcheted
somebody
up.
that got burnt really bad. Like, she's the chairwoman of the legislative district that I used to live in out in Surprise for the GOP, and, her and a lot of the folks that she was surrounding herself for were like, "Yeah, deport the dangerous people, this, that, and the other thing," until
But they won't.
a woman from the city that I now live in is, a woman from Peoria, Arizona, who probably would have been granted asylum 20, 30 years ago when she came over had she applied for it, but she didn't. She was fleeing, I think it was China's restrictive one-child law, so she came over at, like, 19 or 20, pregnant, has been here, like, her kid is almost my age at this point. She owns a business, like, I think a restaurant or something, and she's sitting in an ICE detention facility right now.
Yeah.
And this person who's the chairwoman went with Northwest Valley United, which is kind of that leftist, like no kings, Democrat, independent kind of movement that we've seen out here. And she got censured
Yep.
by her legislative district
And that's,
because she
well,
dared to go on a news with a Democrat, on the news with a Democrat, and talk about this issue.
yep. We're out of time, so we'll have to close here. But I
Yeah,
think
no,
that
no, you're good.
my closing thing here will be, I'll let you kind of close with some plugs. It's just that like at the end of the day, we ask government to like punish the guilty and protect the innocent. That's what Romans 13 says the government is for. But when we advocate for a state to do that, it always inverts it. it ends up punishing the innocent and protecting the guilty. So, Rebekah, I appreciate you coming on tonight. This has been a lot of fun. There's so much more we could talk about, and I hope to have you back on again sometime in the future. Just before we hop off, if you want to shout out your social handles if you want to, and of course, I'll tell people to go to youarethepower.net, which I did make a little banner for that. But where can people follow you if they want to follow you on social?
Yeah, so best place to reach me on social media, and really my only public social media, is Twitter. So at the other Massie, because I'm not Thomas Massie, I'm the other one.
Right.
And then as far as plugs of awesome organizations, You Are the Power, youarethepower.net. I know we've got it linked down there. Great organization fighting government tyranny through the lens of human respect. For those of you wondering about the organization who's representing me in the civil piece of it, the Fire Org is their Twitter handle. They're the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. Great First Amendment law firm, and other than that, right now, I think what's on other people's minds is food security. So if you don't like any of these things, find a food bank. Go donate. Go do that.
Absolutely agree. Thank you, Rebekah. Thank you, everybody, for watching and tuning in. Please make sure you like this video before you hop off. Helps boost this conversation so more people can see it in the algorithm. And we'll be back again next week with more content. As I always conclude by saying, live at peace, live for Christ, take care.